Charlie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here joining in QBerlin. It seems to me that you're just a collection of people who are very concerned about the future. And sometimes you just don't know what's happening in the world and where are we getting to. So it just reminds me of a friend who reminded me of what he called the lessons from the Ottoman. Lesson from the Ottoman goes like this. It says, hard times create strong men and women. The women is my addition. At the time of the Ottoman, they didn't think about women. But anyway, we have to say today it's hard times create strong men and women. Strong men and women create good times. Good times create weak men and women. Weak men and women create hard times. Well, we have to figure out where we are in that whole circle. But I hope maybe for many people who approach these things, you tend to say, we're in hard times, so not to worry. You're going to end up with strong men and women, people who are really concerned about what are you going to do about the situation, rather than just keep talking, figure out what we're going to do. Well, the topic we're supposed to, I'm supposed to address, is such a long title, I can't remember what it is. All I know is kind of, you have all these social and technological changes and so forth, and what are you going to do about it? So I'll just give you a very quick answer, my view, about how to approach it. I think the most important way by which we can tackle these changes that are happening in the world, changes which come very quickly, very rapidly, but just as importantly, changes which you're not really sure where is all this leading to. I believe that the governments were to govern on the basis of reaction, looking at what is happening and figuring out how to react, we're all going to go the wrong way. I think the most important way to handle a situation where things are changing extremely fast, where what you're going to get to is in many ways a journey into an uncertain future. I think the most important way to get there is to make sure you have a compass. The compass is going to make sure that we've got consistency in the strategic direction we are taking. And the other thing is to be clear about where are we trying to get to, so that you can make sure that that's a strategic vision, that strategic outcome you're looking for. I think in many instances, if we can't get clear in our mind, and this is going to be a big public debate, what exactly is the strategic outcome? Where are you trying to get to? If you don't debate at that level, and debate on the level of the mental models about a whole variety of people who are wishing something about their lives and their country, you're just going to create a lot of confusion as to what is it that we're supposed to be doing. So I think we have to be clear what the strategic vision is, what is the strategic end state we're trying to get to, and then make sure you have a compass which keeps us consistent in the direction we are taking. Because if we don't have that, as I said, everything becomes confusion. And when things are changing extremely rapidly, you get distracted very, very easily. I want to share with you just a sense about what we have done in Singapore. Singapore is a terribly small place. I understand that. We're just over 700 square kilometers in area. That's smaller than Berlin. Berlin is much closer to 900 kilometers. We have square kilometers. We have a population of 5.5 million in that small area. If you look at the map of the world, any map of the world, Singapore lies quite nicely within the letter O of the name of the country. If you spell Singapore, there's a letter O towards the end of that name. Well, as I said, you look at a global atlas, any atlas in the world, Singapore will lie within the letter O of the name of the country. We have a big neighbor to the north in Malaysia, we have a big neighbor to the south in Indonesia, and you have to figure out how you're going to maintain your sovereignty and independence despite this smallness. So I'll describe to you what we have done, not on the basis of this is necessarily going to be relevant to you, but just a description, and you pick up what you think is relevant in your own situation. I remember the first time Mr. Deng Xiaoping visited Singapore. Mr. Deng Xiaoping was the strong man of China. First time we visited in Singapore was in 1978. And on the way back to the airport, Ms. Lee Kuan Yew, then Prime Minister in Singapore, was riding with him and asked him, so what do you think of what you've seen? And his answer simply was, well, everything is very nice, very good, but of course, Singapore is a small place. But despite that, this is a smart man. He goes back and he basically tells the people Singapore is a small place. If they can do it, surely China can do better. So if we close our minds to what we can learn from everywhere in the world, we're just going to lose, and we're going to perhaps make the same mistakes as other people have made. Much smarter for us to listen and see what we can learn from other people. So how has Singapore been able to survive since 1965? I need to give you a little history about Singapore. In 1959, and that was when Singapore as a British colony was granted what is called internal self-government, which means to say that we govern everything for ourselves, except the British remain responsible for the defense and security and foreign affairs. And Mr. Lee Kuan Yew then, who was founding Prime Minister of Singapore, he already come to the conclusion that it is not possible for Singapore to be independent on its own. And therefore, we have to get back to where we were originally, which was part of Malaya. Singapore is just at the bottom of the Malayan Peninsula. And so in the general elections in 1959, the manifesto of the People's Action Party, which was led by Lee Kuan Yew, was that Singapore would seek merger with Malaya, something which was not welcomed by Malaya at that time, but it did happen in 1963 when we joined with Malaya and Sabah and Sarawak to form the Federation of Malaysia. But this marriage lasted only 2 years. For various reasons, time does not allow me to get into the specific reason, but in 1965, Singapore came out of Malaysia, independent, on our own, and exactly in the situation which Lee Kuan Yew had decided in 1959 was totally unviable and impossible for Singapore to survive as a separate, independent country. So the question is, how do we make it then from 1965 onwards? And I'll put to you, as I thought about this question for myself, that there were two fundamental reasons why Singapore managed to survive and to succeed over these 50 years and now 52 years. The first is to understand that Singapore is a brand. There's nothing there. Everything that you can be is created just by the energy and imagination of the government and the people. Singapore is a brand. It's a brand of trustworthiness. It's a brand based on the idea of we honor our word, we keep promises that we make, we are reliable, we are dependable, that we keep the rule of law, that we protect intellectual property rights, and that we are people who are consistent and predictable so far, for example, as government policy is concerned. Brand Finance, which is an international brand consultancy firm based in London, did a ranking of what they call the nation brands, and they listed Singapore as the top nation brand in 2015 and again in 2016. After Singapore in the listing of top nation brands was Hong Kong, third was Switzerland, and it goes down the list, a series of European countries plus New Zealand, and then at the bottom, number 10 was Japan. The US was not on the list at all of top nation brands. But we need to understand something about what we mean by top nation brand. When you apply the value of the brand to the size of the economy, and then you end up with something called the top nation brand value, the US is going to be there for at least the next decade, probably the next 2 decades or 3 decades, simply because of the size of the US economy. But when you talk about just the nation brand itself, the strength of the nation brand, that's Singapore. It's a brand of trustworthiness which then draws foreign investors to the country, which draws tourists to the country, which draws wealth to the country, which is why now Singapore is the top wealth management center in Asia. The second reason why Singapore has managed to succeed and to survive these 50 plus years is something which Lee Kuan Yew had decided right from the earliest days of Singapore. And that is to recognize the multiracial and multi-religious nature of Singapore. Singapore is 75% ethnic Chinese, now 13% ethnic Malay, about 10% ethnic Indian. The rest are Caucasians, mostly expats in Singapore. And Lee Kuan Yew then decided that because of this multiracial, multi-religious character of Singapore, we need to run ourselves as a country in which choosing, for example, your faith is an individual right and individual freedom, but the rule is terribly clear and very strictly applied that you may only exercise your choice of religion in a way which does not impinge on the right of your neighbor to exercise his choice. So the same issues go to issues of race and language and religion. We say we leave this as a matter of individual choice, but you may exercise your choice only in a way which does not upset or impinge on the rights of your neighbor to exercise the same choice. Pew Research Center in 2014 named Singapore as the most religiously diverse country in the world. And the question, of course, is how do you manage to maintain social harmony? How do you manage to maintain, to run a country in which the people make space for each other? They recognize the differences, they appreciate the differences, and say, at least if people don't love each other, at least as a process of enlightened self-interest, we make space for each other. And it's terribly clear when you run a country in this way and you have the Chinese with 75% of the population as the dominant ethnic group, that this is a situation where the dominant group always has to make a very deliberate and conscious choice of creating space for the minorities, for the minority groups to be able to exercise their freedoms. This is not a case of, you can say, equality for everyone, but it is a case of wisdom for everyone. So that's the second reason, that we are a place where we honor each other. We honor each other for the differences. We recognize that there are these differences, and therefore, in many ways, you can say we honor diversity. And that's all I wanted to say, that really is the basis upon which Singapore has managed to survive and to prosper since independence, that this is a case where we honor our word, create that whole brand of trustworthiness, and therefore be able to connect to the whole world as the source of foreign investment, as the source of management capability and technology, and as the markets for whatever is produced from Singapore. And second, that we are a place where we honor each other, we make space for each other, because that is the best kind of situation for everyone. Lee Kuan Yew had decided, right, as I said, from early days, that people kill each other for reasons of race and religion. And the formula that we got in Singapore was to say, you just choose for yourself. That's individual freedom, but you may only do it without cutting back on the similar freedom for your neighbor. So that's what I want to leave with you. There was Ali mentioned about Honor Singapore, which is a charity I set up, whose mission is to promote a culture of honor and honoring. And the idea is to promote within Singapore so that every Singaporean can understand it, and every new generation of Singaporeans can understand it, that you build first on the basis of trustworthiness of the country, and second, you build on the basis of respecting each other and making space for each other. But my concluding remark is I also believe that this is not enough for Singapore's future, and we need to add a third leg of honor. And I believe myself that third leg of honor really has to do with a culture of innovation and excellence, and most particularly a culture of outwardness. Singapore simply has to look outwards and cannot just look just inwards upon itself, because we are far too small to think that we can survive just looking at ourselves and working on our own. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you.